And we are back. This week's shiur is going to be a little bit of a different style, little bit of a different shiur. Usually we have one theme, right? And we try to make ha'aras, try to share some insights on the Gemara that we're learning. The story we're learning, sometimes we'll connect it about a person or about a theme. This is going to be three totally separate stories, three great stories. Don't think that, oh wow, it's going to be amazing. In the end he's going to connect all three of these Gemaras. That's not going to happen at all. I just want to expose us to three stories. The first is probably the least well known. Is definitely the least well known. I think it's probably the most amazing. We're just going to learn that story about the great Amora Rabbi Zera. Then we're going to have the most famous, the most well known of all the stories, and we're going to say a beautiful insight on that story. And then lastly, perhaps the most important of all the stories will be the final Gemara, the Gemara in Bava Basra. But we're going to begin with the Gemara in Bava Metzia about Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera was, first of all, very important. He was one of the very few Amoraim who had smicha both in Bavel, where he was born, and then in Eretz Yisrael, where he immigrated to, and that's why sometimes he's called Rav Zera, and sometimes he's called Rebbe Zera. Rav Zera is how they referred to him when he was in Bavel, and then Rebbe Zera is how the rabbis, the Amoraim, were once they received smicha, how they were referred to in Eretz Yisrael. So the Gemara is going to tell you, Rabbi Zera might have been the most intense Jew that ever walked the earth. So the Gemara tells us, Rabbi Zera kisalik la'arid Yisrael. When Rabbi Zera went up to Eretz Yisrael, meaning when he made Aliyah, Yosiv Meya Ta'aniyasa, he underwent 100 fasts. He fasted 100 fasts. So whether that means every single day, lahavdi like Ramadan, or whether that was every Monday and Thursday. Monday and Thursday seemed to be the days that there was more fasting going on, if you learn Maseches Tanis. But whatever it was, he fasted a series of 100 fasts. Why? So that he would be able to forget all of the Gemara, all of the learning that he did in Bavel. He wanted to forget the learning. What in the world does that mean? So Rashi tells us that there was a specific type of learning that took place in Bavel. It was more halachically oriented and different than the way they learned in Eretz Yisrael. And now that he was coming to Eretz Yisrael, he didn't want to learn he didn't want to forget Chas v'Shalom, his actual learning. But what he did want to forget was the approach to learning, was the style of learning. So he wanted to forget that style and be able to almost like reteach himself how to learn in the Yerushalmi or in the Eretz Yisrael style. That's why he took the first 100. Right, in order that he shouldn't distract him, he shouldn't be busy with learning with the Bavel style when he's trying to really get into the Israel style of learning. Okay, then Yasiv Meya Achrinasa. Then he underwent another 100 fasts. Why? The Lolishkov Rabbi Elazar Bishnei. Why? All these, and we know that fasting in Judaism is also a type of tefillah, right? Very often, tefillah and fasting go hand in hand, and as an extra, like pushing the Shari Shemayim, the gates of Shemayim, what did he do? He wanted to daven so that Rabbi Elazar would not die, would not pass away, while Rabbi Zera was alive. Why? Because then he would be in charge. Rabbi Elazar was in charge of all of the communal, the tzibur, right? Milei de tzibur, all of the communal needs, all of the communal issues and matters, and Rabbi Zera didn't want anything to do with that. I don't think not that he didn't want to do anything with it. He didn't want to be the head. He didn't want all the responsibility, the acharayas, to be on his shoulders. So he prayed, you know what? Please let Rabbi Elazar live as long as possible, because I don't want all that responsibility. I want to be learning Torah. That's ultimately what he wanted. The Yasiv Me'achrini, then he has another 100, the last 100. Another the Yasiv Meya Achrine, another 3. The Lo Nishlot Be Nura de Gehenim. He fasted. Why? Because when he gets to Gan Eden, I guess the Masorah is that people spend some time in Gehenna, right? The fires of Gehenna, and he either maybe Rabbi Zera wasn't going to go to Gehenna, maybe he was such a tzaddik, or he felt that maybe he was going to go, and he wanted to daven that the fires of Gehenna would not affect him. Okay, the lo nishlot be nura. Nura is a flame, is a fire. That the nura would not rule over him in Gehenna. It wouldn't affect him in Gehenna. So he would do this, right? So then, kol tlosin yome, every 30 days, what would he do? Have a badik nafshi. He would check himself, right? He would say, am I, can I withstand the fire of Gehenna? How would he do this? Holy cow. Kol tlosin yome, every 30 days, have a badik nafshi, he would check himself. What would he do? Shagar tanura. Shagar Tanur, he opened up, he fired up the oven, Salik v'yasiv b'gavai. And then he went and he sat in the oven. We'll say that again. Salik, he went, v'yasiv b'gavai. He sat in the oven. Why? He was testing it. Can I handle it? Can I handle Gehenna? Imagine doing that. Is this not an amazing story? Imagine doing that. We say this Shabbos, we're going to say, it's Shabbos Mevarchim, so we're going to say the Hiratzon. And we say that we want HaKadosh Baruch Hu to grant us Yira Shamayim and Yiras Chet. We want to be scared of Chet. We want to be conscious of sin. We want to realize how much sin can have a negative effect on us, right? There's a great story that Rav Soloveitchik, when a person sins, whether it's mazid, shogeg, on purpose, by accident, it affects your neshama, right? The Torah is a prescription to live the most healthy, the most spiritually healthy lifestyle one can possibly do, and therefore the Torah is that these are the ingredients, that's the recipe, that's the menu. So Rav Soloveitchik understood this. Rav Soloveitchik, they say the story that he accidentally on Shabbos brushed up against the light. And he didn't realize it at first, but he turned either the light on or the light off. And once he realized it, he fainted. That's Yiras HaChet. He was so scared that what Chet does to you. This is like a completely another level. He's like preparing that he should be able to handle the fires of Gehenna. V'lohava shalta beinura, right? And he went in it, right? And what happened? He was getting better. They didn't have any effect on him, except Yom Achad Yohavu Bei Rabbanan Einei. But there was one time, right, he would do this alone. He wasn't obviously saying, everybody come look at me. There was one day where the other Rabbanan, the other rabbis, his colleagues, the other Talmidei Chachamim, whatever, they saw what he was doing. They saw what he was engaged in. And because there was a little bit of like, maybe an ayin hara, v'icharchu shakei, his shok. He singed his thighs. His thighs became a little bit burnt. Why? Because there was a little bit of an ayin hara when other people saw that what this holy tzaddik was doing. And from the end of the story, v'karu lei, and from this day on, the other rabbis called him katin charuch shakei, right? The small man with the burnt thighs. That's probably part of it is why he was called Zera. Zeira in Aramaic means small or little one. So that's perhaps where he got his name from, this amazing story. But the intensity of a person's avoda, to first of all believe that really just the belief that Gehenna is real, the belief that you're going to have to fight it, the belief that I'm going to prepare for it, that I'm going to do all I can do, right? He was obviously a person, an unbelievably intense person. All the fasting and the and obviously checking whether the fires of Gehenna are going to have any effect on him is also obviously next level. That's the story of Rabbi Zera, an unbelievable story. Here we go to our most famous story, which is a completely unrelated story, in Kiddushin Daf Lamed Aleph. The Gemara says, Amar V'Damar Shmuel Shalu Es Rabbi Eliezer. They asked Rabbi Eliezer, Ad heichan kibud av va'im. How far, to what extent, the Gemaras in Kiddushim, Daf Lamed, Lamed Aleph, Lamed Bet, there are a lot of famous topics over there, famous sugyas, but this is the sugya, this is the topic of kibud av va'im. So they asked Rabbi Eliezer, Ad heichan kibud av, how far, to what extent does a person have to do kibud av va'im? So Amar Lahem. So those are answers. You know what? I'm going to show you. I'm going to tell you a story about how, to what extent a person has to honor their father and their mother. Amar lehem, tzu'uru, go out and see. Ma'asa oved kochavim echad. Go and see what this oved kochavim, this idol worshiper, this non-Jew, did la'aviv ba'Ashkelon. He lived in Ashkelon. V'dama ben Nesina. He's telling the story about a non-Jew. His name is Dama ben Nesina, who lived in Ashkelon. What happened? Bikshu mimenu chachamim avanim le'efod. The chachamim came. And obviously, his family, his father had some type of jewels, of pearls, right? Avanim, precious stones, and they needed the precious stones that his father had, that his father sold. They needed for the ephod, for the apron of the Kohen Gadol on the much more. We're going to actually read a Parshas Pekudei, so that the Kohen Gadol wore like an apron, and over here on the arm things, whatever those are called, they were stones, and those were the Avnei Shoham. So the rabbis, the Chachamim, come and they ask, they want to get, right? They want to get these Avanim le'ephod, and they say it was Shishim Ribo, right? $60,000. $600,000, let's call it, right? And if Kahana says no, it was 80,000. It was worth 80,000. V'haya. Now, what was the problem here? They're going to pay either 60, 80, tons of money. V'haya mafteach munach tachat meirashotav shel aviv. Right? What happened? The problem is that in the treasure chest or in their safe or wherever it is, the key to get the jewels, where Dama ben Asina is going to make the money, right? That is the mafteach. The key is under his father's head, and his father is sleeping. And Dama ben Asina makes the decision. V'lo tziro. He doesn't bother him. He doesn't trouble him. Really, he doesn't wake him up. Okay, and that's the story. Amazing. You don't want to wake up your father, and you don't wake up your parent. Obviously, we all would disagree with that. We would happily be woken up, I'm sure. The question that I can't answer also is, if it was so important for the Chachamim, why did they not just wait around, right? Wait around, even if you took a 9-hour nap. Just wait around, right? That's the story doesn't fill in that detail. The story is here to tell us the greatness of Dam ben Asina, how we can learn how much a person needs to honor their parent. And this story of Dam ben Asina does it. L'shana ha'acheres. The next year, what happened? So this guy gave up all this potential gain, all this money. So l'shana ha'acheres, the next year, nasan HaKadosh Baruch Hu scharo. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave him back his reward, meaning he's going to ultimately make this money back. How? Shenolda lo para aduma. Because how did he make his money back? In his flock, in Dam ben Asina's parents or his own flock, grew a para aduma, a red cow. There's only been 7 red cows in the history of the Jewish people. One of those 7, the Gemara tells us, was born, and was ultimately nurtured and raised within the family of Dama ben Asina, Be'edro, in his flock. So what happened? Word travels that in Ashkelon there's a para aduma. So nichnusu chachamei Yisrael etzo. So all of a sudden, once again, knock, knock, knock. The chachamim come and they knock on the door of Dama ben Asina, right? Amar lahem, second to last line of the Gemara in Kiddushin. Amar lahem, he says to them, right there, say, we want this. We're going to pay you. Amar lahem, he says to them, Yodea ani, I know bachem, I know about you. She'im ani mevakesh mikem kol mamon sheba olam. I know that if I ask you whatever I ask for you, right, you're going to give me a blank check. Ani Amar Yodea ani, I know about you. She'im ani mevakesh michem kol mamon sheba. That I ask for any money, any amount of money in the world, atem notim li. You will happily give me, because you want this para aduma so badly. Ella, rather, Udam Rasid is an amazing person. Ella ein ani mevakesh michem. I'm not requesting anything from you. Ella oso mamon, except for that money, except that amount of money. Sheifsadadi b'shvil kibud abba. Except I'm only asking for the 60,000 or the 80,000, whatever it was. I'm only asking for that money that I lost last year when I didn't wake up my father. What an amazing story! Now, Rav Yitzchak Yosef, who's the son of the late great Rav Avad Yosef, has a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful ha'ara on this Gemara that needs to be said and needs to be understood. There are many different types of mitzvos, and some of those, right, the question that Rav Avad is asking is, why specifically was Dama ben Asina paid back with the para aduma? I mean, we could say, okay, it's all luck, right? He gave up this potential gain because of kibbud avaim, and just the way God orchestrated it, right? Well, the Yad Hashem in it was that it was a para aduma. Why was it a para aduma? Why specifically Why was the Dam Nesina rewarded, or why was the money? The money could have been made back in many different ways. It could have had it could have been a real estate investment, could have been Bitcoin, could have been GameStop. Lots of different things could have benefited Dama ben Nesina. Why specifically, Ravadja wants to know, why specifically was it the Para Aduma? So interestingly, when we do a mitzvah, right? Most often, when we do a mitzvah, we make a bracha on that mitzvah. But you might have noticed that we almost always, almost exclusively, when you make a bracha on a mitzvah, you make a bracha on a lulav, you make a bracha on the shofar, you make a bracha on your tzitzis, on your tefillin, on Neiros Chanukah, on Neiros Shabbos, on a mezuzah. When you make a bracha, almost always, those mitzvos are bein adam limakom. There are mitzvos that are between people and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You do not make brachos, almost exclusively, you do not make brachos on mitzvos that are bein adam lechavero. Something to talk about, something to think about is that we do make a bracha on makeh. If a person has, the pasuk in Parshas Kiteitzei says that if you have a roof, a flat roof. So just like, obviously in your home, you're on your staircase, you have a railing. So if you have a flat roof, you need to build a fence around that, a fence around your ceiling. That's vasita makeh ligagecha. You have to make a makeh, a fence, ligagecha, on your roof. That seems to be a mitzvah. I'm assuming that's a mitzvah ben adam lechavero. I would think that would be an exception to this rule. But generally, the klal is you make brachos on mitzvos ben adam limakom. You do not make brachos on mitzvos ben adam lechavero. So there are reasons for it. One potential reason is that the receiver of the chesed, the receiver of the mitzvah, for example, it could be mishlalach manos, it could be tzedakah, it could be bikur cholim, it could be making a shiva kol, nicham avelim. It could be that the person doesn't want to receive it. You come, I'm saying, al mitzvahs nicham avelim, right before you make the shiva kol, and the person says, I don't want to see you. The person doesn't like you. Bikur cholim, the person could be sleeping. It could be tzedakah, person, I don't want it, right? So, that we sometimes you have extra food, you have extra shalach manos food. You could go around. There's obviously a major homeless problem in Los Angeles. You go around. You could buy extra food, and you can go to give a person a loaf of bread and a jug of milk or something. Say al mitzvah stuck, and you're going to give it to them. They might not want it. So then it's a bracha levatala. So some of the Rishonim say that's the reason. But the Rashba says a different reason. The Rashba says that we can't say asher kedishanu b'mitzvotav vitzivanu. Vitzivanu, and we were commanded. I was commanded to do bikur cholim. I was commanded to blow shofar. I was commanded to give tzedakah. I was commanded to light the Chanukah candles. There's a big difference between that. Rashba says, hopefully, irrespective of whether a person is commanded or not commanded, they're still gonna visit the sick. They're still gonna invite guests to their home. They're still gonna give tzedakah. Those brachos you can't say vitzivanu because those mitzvos are called mitzvos sichlios. Rational, logical mitzvos don't get a bracha according to the Rashba. Rashba was one of the great Spanish. One of the great Spanish Rishonim. So he says you can't make a bracha on something that I would most probably do anyways. Lots of non-Jews do. Lots of non-Jews do mitzvos ben adam lechavero. Lots of non-from Jews are engaged in chesed and other certain types of things. So you can't say vitzivanu. But lulav, would I do lulav if I wasn't commanded? Right? Would I eat matzah if I wasn't commanded? No. There I could say asher kedishanu mitzvosav vitzivanu. So those mitzvos are called, most mitzvos ben adam lechaveru, interpersonal mitzvos are called mitzvos sichlios. Our seichel is my mind, my brain. They're rational, logical mitzvos. Why was Dama ben Nesina, right? What was the message? What was the message of Dama ben Nesina? What did he say to the Chachamim? I know you Chachamim, just like you were going to give 60, 80,000 ribo for the Avnei Shom, I know that you would write a blank check even for a para aduma. What do we know about a para aduma? A para aduma is the zot chukat haTorah. Zot chukat haTorah. It's the quintessential, it's the paradigmatic chok of the Torah. It's the mitzvah in the Torah that we do not understand the reason. We do not understand the rationale for the mitzvah. It's completely illogical. But a Jew looks at mitzvos, whether they're perhaps the most rational mitzvah in the world, like Kibbud Av V'Em. Is there a more logical mitzvah? Is there a more logical positive, and maybe not murdering, but is there a more logical positive mitzvah that we do than honoring our parents? I'm not sure. They give us everything. So of course we have to do Kibbud Av V'Em. That's the most logical mitzvah. So Ravadia says, you know what? On a rational mitzvah, I can learn from a non-Jew. I can learn from Dam ben Asina for a mitzvah for a mitzvah that's sichli, that's rational. But you know what a Jew's hashkafa is? A Jew's approach to mitzvos is not only, we don't only do things when we understand them, we do mitzvos even when we completely do not understand them. A blank check, the Chachamim say, a blank check for the para aduma. A blank check for a mitzvah, we do not understand. And that's the greatness. That's the power of the Gemara, right? To what extent? I can learn that from a non-Jew. Because that's Kibbud Av V'Em. We understand that. That's the Rashba. It's a mitzvah sichli. I would do it even if I wasn't commanded, right? What I do with all the details, probably not. Probably not. And Jews give more tzedakah and probably do more chesed than the rest of the world. That's for sure, right? But on the floor level, on the bottom grade level, but a chok, do other people, if you don't believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, would you do a chok? Not in a second. Ravadi says that's the Gemara. For non-Jews, I can learn mitzvah sichlios. That's great. But you know what? A Jew's hashkav, a Jew's approach to mitzvos is that I do my mitzvos when I understand them, as well as when I do not understand them. The most important Gemara that we are going to learn is this final Gemara. And this Gemara is found in Bava Basra on Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph. And it gives basically the history of the Jewish educational system. And this is a name to know. It's a name to remember. And his name was Yoshua ben Gamla. The Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav, Bram. Bram means like, yes, indeed. Zachar oso aish letov. We remember this man, letov. This man is remembered, letov. Right? V'gam charvona zachar letov. Just like charvona zachar letov. Yoshua ben Gamla Shemo, and his name is Yoshua ben Gamla. So Yoshua ben Gamla, very, very, very important. He's the father of the educational system of the Jewish people. He is Zachor Latov. He is remembered for good. Why? Because if not for Yoshua ben Gamla, Nishtachach Torah Yisrael, Torah would have been. This is a major statement. Torah would have been forgotten from the Jewish people. Why? Shebatchila, because originally, back in the day, what would happen? Misha Yeshlo Av Milamdo Torah. Whoever had a father, the father would teach him Torah, right? But Misha Ein Lo Av Lo Hayalame Torah. But if he didn't have a father, he wouldn't teach you Torah. Right? And I would add, I can't imagine that everybody knew, right? So if you don't have a father, right, and you don't know anything, so then you're going to have another kid. So it's not only kids that don't have a father; it's also kids that never learned, or kids that didn't retain everything. So the chain would always be broken in families where there wasn't a father or someone didn't learn well. Why was that? Why was that the original plan? My Dorish, what do the rabbis explain? How do they expound? What pasuk? We know this pasuk. Right? You have to teach your sons. You have to teach your children Torah. Okay, but if you don't have sons, can't do it. Okay, next. So what was the next step in the process? We realized that this was a broken system. If you can only rely on father to son transmission of Torah, that's a broken system. So next part of the Gemara, the Chachamim, right? The sages, Chazal, what did they enact? They decreed that they would put teachers, melamde tinokos, teachers of babies, right? But it means teachers of children, b'Yushalayim, that they put teachers, they put rebbeim in Yerushalayim, so that kids could go to like a Talmud Torah. Kids from all around could go and they could learn Torah. Why Dafki Yerushalayim? Why? My Darish, where did they find this? What was this idea based on? My Darish, what was the pasuk? Torah. They darshan the pasuk Ki mitzion teitzei Torah. From Tzion, teitzei Torah. Torah comes out. Torah emanates from Tzion, from Yerushalayim. Okay. Va'adayin misha yesh lo av hayamalo melamdo, right? So still, even with this wonderful plan of having I guess education open for everybody in Yerushalayim, that would only be you had to be able to get there, right? So you had to be able to have a parent, you had to be able to have a father who was going to ultimately bring them to Yerushalayim, and then the Rebbe could teach him there. But Misha Ein Lo Av, Lo Haya Olev V'Lomet. He didn't have a father, you couldn't go up to Yerushalayim. So, Hitkinu Shiyu Moshivim B'Chol Pelach U'Pelach. So then next, step 3, right? Step 3 is that now the Chacham, the sages enacted a new thing, that all the local, the Pelach U'Pelach, in every different province, area, county, the local authorities would install Rebbeim, would sort of Rebbeim in each and every Pelech uPelech. Umachnisin also kiben tes zayin, kiven yud zayin. And when would kids start having their education? They would start having their education at 16 or 17, right? Meaning anybody who lacked. I'm assuming that the fathers would teach them, and then they would continue in all these communities to almost, I guess, like a high school or a high school for that. But umishahaya rabo koesalav. But this was like a little bit of an elite. This was like a little bit of an elitist type place. Umishahaya rabo koesalav. But any student who their teacher would get kas, who would get angry at them, mevayit bo v'yatza, would kick him out. Right? Mevayit bo v'yatza. Any student whose teacher got angry with him, he would rebel against the teacher. Now you're dealing with high school kids, right? With high school kids, the teacher doesn't treat me fairly. The teacher is not respectful to me. Then what? Then I'm going to rebel. Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch has an amazing idea. Why Dafka high school kids are going to rebel? He says the word in Tanakh for like a middle school, an adolescent, right? Middle school or high school an adolescent is a na'ar. What does na'ar mean? We use, okay, the kid's 14, he's a na'ar. He's 15, he's a na'ar. Lin na'er means to shake off. Amazingly, Rav Hirsch writes that it's built into the nature of like an adolescent, that what are they trying to do? They want lin na'er. They want to shake off whatever's been throwing on them. They're trying to shake it off. So whenever a parent's teaching them, and you should wear long skirts, and you should learn more, and you should be nice, and you should do your homework, or all the stuff that it's built into the bria, it's built into the nature of adolescents, that they are rebellious. So the Gemara sees this. Right, Mevayit bo v'yatza, they're going to leave the yeshiva. Ad sheba Yoshua ben Gamla, until the great Rabbi Shua ben Gamla comes, v'tikein, and he makes a decree, shemoshivim melambi tinokos, that the local authorities should install melambi tinokos, rebbeim, teachers, b'chol medina u'medina, u'v'chol ir va'ir. In every country, in every district, in every state, in every county, in ir v'ir, and in every city and town. But when do these schools start? Umachnisin otan keven sheish keven sheva. And when do you say they begin at age 6 or at age 7? Yoshua ben Gamla basically says it's basically public education. That the Jewish state, right? That the Jewish state must install learning opportunities free of charge, irrespective of whether you have a father, you have parents, your parents can teach you, your parents can't teach you, whatever it is. There has to be in every place education, in every city, in every town, in every country, in every community. There needs to be that. And who do we have to thank for that? None other than Rabbi Yoshua ben Gamla. Rabbi Yoshua ben Gamla is Zachur La Tov. 3 stories. First story, Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera wanted to feel the fires of Gehenna. So every 30 days he would test himself out. He would assess his growth, right? 300. First he did 300 fasts, 100, 100, 100. And then he was testing out, wanted to see the fires of Gehenna. And that last time he got a little bit burnt, and perhaps that's where he gets the name Rabbi Zera Zeira, the Aramaic word for small or short. Anyway, the other Gemara of probably the most famous Gemara of Dama ben Nesina, the Gemara in Kiddushin about Kibbur Aveim and not waking his father up. How did he get paid back? He got paid back from the Paraduma. Why specifically the Paraduma? Because the Jews' approach to mitzvos is not only by mitzvos that we understand, mitzvos sichlios like Kibbur Aveim, but we would do anything even for a mitzvah that we do not understand. Right? Shatnez is a perfect example of a mitzvah we don't really comprehend, but we get our suits and our pants and our jackets checked for shatnez here in LA or wherever you are listening. And finally, the great Yoshua ben Gamla Zachar Latov, that the educational system is based on his takana and his learning from the past of what didn't work, and ultimately installing and insisting that every Jewish kid from the age of 6 or 7 begins to get a Jewish education. Have a marvelous, marvelous week.